Welcome everyone to this episode of Manufacturing Talk Radio. I'm Tim Grady. I'm here with Lou Weiss, who's the founder of Manufacturing Talk Radio. He is also the president of All Metals and Forge Group. If you're looking for open die forgings and seamless rolled rings, like those large gears behind us, you can find those at steelforge.com. Joining us today is Wade Phillips. Wade is Managing Director of Seraph, and he's got the logo behind him. So if you look at Seraph and just add the word .com, you'll know their website. Wade, you are a specialized strategic and implementation consulting firm. Give us a little idea of what Seraph does, if you would, please.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. First, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Seraph is a little bit of a unique consulting company. We have to categorize ourselves as consultants because we have to be categorized somewhere. But consulting, as you can imagine, has there's a wide variety of what people consider consulting. You have everything from what we call body shops, which are kind of the lower end contractors, more or less, all the way up to some of those recognizable names like McKinsey, Alex Partners, Boston Consulting Group, some of those guys that do really strategic work. We do more of a niche. We do the strategy, but at the same time, something that we're really proud of is that we get hands-on. We look at PowerPoint as a communication tool, not a deliverable. We'll give you a nice PowerPoint presentation and tell you, here's what we think the strategy should be. Now follow me, let's go implement. Very hands-on, very pragmatic. And we do our hiring of our consultants to that end. Very much operational experts who have done it in practice. We have some people right out of school, obviously, that we use as analysts and train and those kind of things. But ultimately, we're looking for those high-end, seasoned veterans who have done it on a plant floor, specifically in the manufacturing industry.
And when you look at manufacturing, Wade, or when Seraph looks at a client company, are you following, where's your starting point? Where's your ending point in that manufacturing process?
Oh, all the way from beginning to end. I mean, our forte is on the manufacturing floor, but we do get involved significantly in the upfront processes. One of the things we noticed during the pandemic actually is, manufacturing, because of the pandemic, everybody was sitting at home, so you can't really manufacture anything if you're sitting on your couch. And so production in a lot of these companies, a lot of manufacturing facilities just came to a halt. But the upfront processes to launch new products didn't. And so we were in a unique position during that time, because what we did is, with our experience in crisis management, turnaround and managing production and operations improvement, we took that know-how and said, what if we got more involved in those upfront processes and prevented the crisis versus being tapped on the shoulder to go help fix them. So we've created quite a nice practice around let's help you prevent the crisis up front, because we have a unique set of skills and experience because we're used to reacting to those problems.
Well, of course, the pandemic wasn't, we didn't know it was coming. So when the pandemic came, obviously you were now dealing with trying to fix things after the crisis occurred, correct?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's really our forte. So a vast majority of our business, so much like you, I've heard they've been around for 10 years. Seraph's been around for 10 years in its current form. This was our 10-year anniversary. And through that 10 years, we really grew up in the automotive business. While we do a lot of other business outside automotive in manufacturing, whether it be medical device, aerospace, some DoD work, some of those kind of things, the vast majority of our business has been in automotive. And so we spent a lot of time during the pandemic working on some of those automotive launch programs that never stopped. But our forte through that 10 years has been crisis management turnaround. Probably 65–70% of our business is in that reacting to crises, whether it be through a pandemic or in those situations where those launch programs have gone awry. So yeah, that's what we do.
One of the things that Tim and I have noticed over the 10 years, and actually it didn't take us long to figure it out, probably only 3 or 4 months. And part of the reason that we started Manufacturing Talk Radio was to drive manufacturing clients to our primary business, which is All Metals and Forge Group. And that was what we started out, drive manufacturers to come to our forge facility.
Mhm.
But within 3 or 4 months, we realized that there's a lot of things that manufacturers don't know about. And so we started bringing the message to them about things they don't know about. In your case, you're talking about crises. One of the things that we picked up on is that, manufacturers know how to make things. They know how to sell things. They know how to ship it. They know how to package it. There's a lot of things they know, but they don't necessarily know how to market it. So in your case, do they know how to handle a crisis? And I'm going to answer the question, no. So tell us about that.
Yeah, you beat me to it. And no, in a lot of cases, no. So we have some really proven processes over 10 years that we've kind of gathered together to react to these kind of crises. And it's not rocket science. It's not some process that you wouldn't think to use or those kind of things. It's just that companies don't recognize that they're going into crisis, and once they get in the crisis, they get consumed by the day-to-day activity and abandon their processes. And when they do that, then anytime you're outside a process, you're just inducing variation, which is going to cause you more. So you end up kind of spiraling out of control. We have processes where we can kind of step in and stop that spiral very quickly. We have a kind of a 4-phased process. First is to understand, because in many cases, we're not familiar with your day-to-day issue and what's got you into this crisis. So we got to understand that very quickly. But we have processes to do that very, very quickly, and then go in immediately into stabilization. So let's stabilize it first. Let's stop spiraling. And start to stabilize the process. But that's not good enough, right? Because once you've reacted to the crisis and got things stabilized, you can't survive with Seraph being there forever, and we know that. And our objective is to get in, stabilize it, and then get out. And the only way to get out is to put in processes to sustain what we've put in there. And then our last phase is simply a transition where we gather those lessons learned, and hopefully we've done a good job with our processes from a sustained perspective that the company can organically continue to perform, and that transition gives them the lessons learned to be able to manage it beyond that.
So I'm kind of curious. We're all salespeople. Down dirty, we are just salespeople. So do you go find the customers, or are they finding you?
Well, early on in our business, I've been around. So I said we've been around for about 10 years. I've been around for about 4.5, 5. And early on, prior to me, I think, we had to go find business. I mean, it's not something that, people, it's just recently, actually, after 10 years that Seraph is becoming a name across manufacturing that people recognize. You'd be surprised in my first 4.5 years how many, or 4 years, how many people say, well, what is Seraph? Who is Seraph? Now people are starting to understand who Seraph is and what we do and those kind of things. But ultimately, once we go in and satisfy a need, right? I mean, we consider ourselves problem solvers at really the heart of it. Ultimately, it's to solve problems. Because just saying that we do crisis management turnaround, well, what's the problem causing the crisis? So it's a matter of solving those things and helping companies do that problem solving. Once we've proven that and we've shown a return on investment, which is a lot of times not what consultants will do, we pride ourselves on making sure that there's a payback for what we do. And a return on investment, and we hold ourselves to a pretty high standard to make sure that we're actually providing value for the market. Once we've shown that, we get a lot of repeat business and a lot of referral business, especially with the automotive. I said that a lot of our business is with automotive. A lot of the automotive OEMs will recommend us very heavily to their supply base because we do a lot of work with the supply base. So that's kind of transitioning. I would say in the beginning, it was very much go hunting. And now it's starting to be a mixture of hunting and referral.
Excuse me, I gotta turn this off.
So Wade, you mentioned automotive, and without naming names, can you give our listeners kind of a feel for what crisis may have occurred or what types of crises happen in which Seraph comes in the door to stop the spiraling and stabilize and sustain, and then sayonara?
Yeah, and then sayonara. You know, that's funny. I think we may institutionalize that as our part of our process. The 4 S's: stabilize, sustain, sayonara. Yeah. So there's been quite a few different compounding effects recently, as we all know, right? Those black swan events that have happened. You've got supply chain issues, COVID, just a lot of different kind of black swan events that have caused a lot of manufacturers to declare force majeure. And it has really gotten a lot of the lower tiers, people that weren't as flush with cash, are distressed in pretty significant numbers at this point. Actually, we're being told by our from an automotive perspective, just using automotive as an example, we're being told by our OEM clients that prior to COVID, they had probably 1% of their supply base that they would say is high risk and distressed. And a lot of that is the business that comes to Seraph is things like, you know, that top 1%. That's actually increased fourfold because of COVID and those black swan events, availability of labor, all of those things that I'm sure you and your listeners all know about. We see it in the news every day. But in addition to those black swan events, what we found after kind of the 2008, 2009 financial crisis is that companies were not as efficient, operating as efficiently as they may have thought they should be, or that they thought that they would be prior to going into COVID and that kind of thing. So there's efficiency issues. They had substantial supply chain issues, quite honestly, before COVID even happened. And now, you know, obviously they're exacerbated by all of those kind of things. Labor availability, we found that through the labor availability, I've had literally clients that have said, well, labor is my major issue. And I ask them, okay, what's your starting wage? And they give me a starting wage that's literally 50% below the market value. Well, of course you're having labor issues. You're not paying what you need to be paying to get I mean, when you're competing with, you know, $21 an hour at the local McDonald's, and you're paying 15, you're probably not going to get the labor that you're expecting to get, and providing those advancement opportunities for people and those kind of things. So we do a lot of that work as well, going in and helping them with organizational analysis and trying to understand where they need to be paying and the structure, a more efficient structure for their business and those kind of things. So there's a lot of those kind of things that are inherent in people's businesses, and they're hiding behind, to be honest with you, hiding behind things like, well, it's COVID and I can't get people because of COVID and I got supply chain issues. Well, okay, you can't solve those. What you can solve is what's happening in your 4 walls. And if we look very closely and do some analysis, we'll find that you're not performing as well as you could be performing. And we see that a lot.
I'm not surprised to hear that. I think we've had a couple of conversations around this subject, and what we find is that manufacturers, by and large, because they've been doing the same process over and over and over and over, and it's working, it's kind of like, don't stick a monkey wrench in the production line that's working. Just leave it alone.
Right,
right. But when a company like Seraph comes in and they look at that production line, they say, you realize you can get about 15% better throughput on this line if you did these 3 things.
Right. No, absolutely. We've done over the past couple of years through COVID, in a lot of cases, I talked about the automotive OEMs are seeing a significant uptick in their riskiest suppliers. And we've had a number of OEMs, again, I won't mention names, but a number of OEMs that have come to us and said, look, here's the list of our what we consider our riskiest suppliers. Maybe it's a list of 20. One company came to us and said, here's 30 of our riskiest suppliers, and we'd like you to go do an assessment of each one of those. And we have multiple different processes that we use for assessments. We have the rapid plan assessment that some are familiar with. We have a deep dive manufacturing assessment, and then we have a kind of a 5-day long deep assessment. And depending on how long it is how deep we go. But ultimately, we've done probably 200 of those over the past 2 years, we'll call it. And that's what we find almost exclusively, especially after COVID, is many of the companies will say, well, yeah, but COVID and supply chain and labor issues and all these black swan events, what do you want me to do? Well, there's a whole lot you can do. And there are a lot of things that tools that we can help with and we can provide, and we can increase efficiency and productivity and get a lot more out of it for you at a return. I mean, we can provide a return on investment doing that.
Do you find that when you go into a potential new client and you do an assessment of what their issues are, do they go into a state of shock when you tell them you're in crisis and you don't know it? And here's what you need to do. Well, I've been doing this, but you need to change. I have a favorite expression: change or die.
Lou, it's interesting that no, most of them don't. Most of them say, yeah, you're kind of spot on. I agree. Well, okay, why aren't you doing anything about that? Right. And that's a question I can't answer, why people aren't doing anything about it. But a lot of what we see is when companies go into crisis, the leadership has stopped leading. And I know that may be provocative, and I appreciate the fact that we don't have a live studio audience that's going to beat me over that, because it's basically indicting the leadership that's brought us in to do the assessment. But leadership's kind of stopped leading, right? I mean, leadership, you require a clear and coherent vision that people can buy into, provide expectations for people to be able to achieve that vision, make sure that people have the tools to be able to achieve those expectations, and then hold them relentlessly accountable. And typically what we find from a leadership perspective as they go into crisis is they don't take the time to do those first three, and they just hold people accountable, and then they want to blame the people, right? We see a lot of that from a leadership perspective. Another thing we see is at the kind of critical middle management is that when people get into crisis, they come in the morning, they get their cup of coffee, they turn their computer on and stare at the computer and just wait for the next crisis to come through the door, because that's how they've trained themselves to feel productive. So they're working on or in the business versus working on it. And that's something we have processes for as well, that we can kind of break that cycle. But ultimately, to answer your question, no, we don't really find that. When we give our report out on the assessment, we give a detailed assessment report. The leadership typically says, "Yep, that's what we see too." The what is typically is typically readily apparent. People know what. I mean, you can see it. The question is how and who are going to fix it. And that's where we come into play. Okay, here's the what. Everybody sees the what. Here's how we would fix that, and how we can help you with people to be able to do that, to be able to resolve the issues.
So when you walk in the door, and you start doing the assessment, how long does an assessment take typically for you to be able to make a presentation to management and say, here's what's wrong, here's the way we think we can fix it, and here's how long it'll take for us to do the implementation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have, just in our processes, we have 3 different types of assessments. We have a rapid plan assessment that takes basically a day. And in that assessment, we look at operations or production, quality and logistics, and people issues. We've added people issues just simply because of the pandemic situation, the availability of labor. And we look at those things in a day, and I'll tell you the result of that is basically to understand, where there's smoke, there's fire. We can identify where the smoke is and where the fire is probably coming from, but in a day, you're not going to fully understand how to. But we can come out of that with a proposal on here's what we would go do to understand that and what we typically see and what we think we're going to see, and here's how we would resolve that. Then we have a 3-day assessment where we go in and do a pretty good deep dive of production, logistics, quality, and program management. And then of course we've added people issues to that as well. But in 3 days, we can start to identify, well, there's the smoke, there's the fire. So we understand what is, we've gathered enough data over 3 days to understand what's causing the fire. And here's what we would do to go resolve that. And then we have a 5-day assessment that we've tacked on 2 days to that to do a little bit deeper dive, but also to add financials in, because we typically don't look at the financials. And so after each one of those, within 48 hours or so, we will have a comprehensive report that says, here's what we've seen, here's what we would do about it, and here's how Seraph can help do that.
So you're involved as well in the implementation of a corrective action.
Yeah, in many cases, it becomes a negotiation with the client, right? They'll say, we recommend, say, 8 people. I'm making this up, but 8 people, an engagement manager, and maybe some help in logistics, production, and quality. But they say, no, we've got the quality. We'll take care of that. We'll own that work package. And we reduce the number, and okay, here's our scope. Here's what we're going to go solve for you. And while you're solving that kind of thing.
Got it.
Are many of these companies that you're working with, Wade, ISO registered? They've gone through the ISO process. They've nailed down what they're doing, and they've got it pretty well documented. So it makes it easier for you to analyze what's going on if they've got that process pretty well written.
Yeah, and in most cases, yes. Most of the clients that we have are ISO or IATF or some certification processes, absolutely. And yes, it's helpful. Companies in crisis, I will tell you, aren't following their processes anymore, though. And so I went to an assessment that just came to mind. I kind of smiled when you said that because I went to an assessment not long ago to a company, a manufacturer. It wasn't an automotive company, it was a manufacturer, and they said, yeah, we're ISO 9000 certified. Well, it was a 3-day assessment, so I got in pretty deep with it, and found out on the second day that they had an ISO re-registration audit, surveillance audit, I guess, the next week. And part of my report out is you're not going to pass that audit because you're not following your process. And here's the data that says that. And they ended up postponing the audit. That's what they did. But in many cases, when you get into crisis management turnaround, folks are not following their process, and that's a big part of the problem, is they're not following their process.
One of the things that All Metals and Forge Group, and I'm going to beat our chest a little bit about this. We're ISO and AS 9100 registered now 28 years, and we cannot run our business if we were to drop the ball on doing all the things that we have to do. And that's something that your clients, as you mentioned, they're not following it. That only adds to their problem.
That's right. That's right. And hence the crisis and the need for turnaround. Is they're not following their processes. I appreciate hearing you say that we couldn't run our business without those processes. Well, that's true. And in many cases, if you're not following those processes, you're not running your business, and therefore you're in crisis.
Right. Exactly. And
Well,
we have felt this over the years, and I'll never forget when we started with ISO and AS back in the 90s. We did have a fair amount of pushback from the employee staff, and it didn't take long, though, for them, particularly from the sales and marketing side, that they realized that, oh, wait a minute, we now have this and we're doing that, and just This is the gravy train. And it's been like that now, like I said, for 28 years.
Yeah. That's we see that in most of the companies that we go into as well. Is there's no, wait a minute, this is the way we've always done it. Why are you wanting to change things? And of course, this is a company in crisis, and there's, you want to hold up a mirror and say, well, this is why. I mean, what you're doing is not working. But ultimately, what we find is that toward the end of the project, the benefactors of the project are saying, I don't know how we wouldn't do it without this stuff. So it's always very positive.
Manufacturing is always fascinating because if I'm a manufacturer and I go out and buy a machine, my expectation is that the machine is going to do the same process flawlessly over and over and over. And what comes out of the machine, I should have a process for so it operates flawlessly to the next machine. And if I don't have that or I violate that, then I'm calling Seraph in the next phone call.
Right. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, but obviously that machine isn't going to do that without proper PM, without proper capacity planning, without proper scheduling, without trained people, and management decisions from a good supervisor, production manager, those kind of things. The machine is only going to do what you're telling it to do.
Very true. And Lou and I always watch the Institute for Supply Management reports, and one area that they cover is capacity utilization. It's always interesting to us. Where is manufacturing as an industry in their capacity? Are they in the 60s, which is not good? Are they in the 70s, which is good? Are they in the high 80s? And now they're pressing against the wall because they don't have sufficient time for preventative maintenance and taking care of those kinds of issues. But I wonder how many manufacturers look at their efficiency utilization. Are they being as efficient as they can be? Well, are they willing to question the process?
Right. Yeah. We actually have an in-house software company called Production Net, and that Production Net is OEE based, and so we're surprised at how many assessments we do in companies that we visit that aren't looking at OEE or any type of real efficiency. They might, from an efficiency perspective, look at their labor productivity and say, well, we expected X and we're getting Y. Do the math and we're X% efficient. That's not the way to do efficiency, right? And so one of the things that we do on many of our crisis management turnaround projects, virtually all of them, is bring that software with us, because we can have it implemented very quickly and be gathering actionable data with regard to efficiency very quickly. And it gets us to the point where we're automatically generating Paretos within about 48 hours and saying, these are what our top issues are that are preventing our efficiency, whether it be from availability, performance, or quality. And we can start to apply action to making that efficiency go up. I will tell you, though, that we're surprised post-pandemic how inefficient companies are. So when you say companies, how often are they looking at their efficiency and that kind of thing? When we go in and look, or capacity, you mentioned the capacity. Well, is that capacity relative to what? Relative to the what we should produce in the industry, or the maximum available in the industry, or where we're actually performing, relative to what from a capacity perspective? Because I would tell you, there is a lot of capacity in the manufacturing industry in general that we're not capitalizing on because we're running very inefficiently in many cases.
And there are some great stories that come out of manufacturing. I remember one that came out about Ivory soap. And the company was getting back letters that say, thank you so much. We love Ivory soap because it floats. And they said, it's not supposed to float. Why is it floating? And it turns out to be women washing their clothes in the river, and they didn't lose the bar of soap because it floated instead of sank. So in every crisis or mess, there's opportunity, and they tracked it back to the blending machines, which were running too long and putting too much air in the soap. but out of it came a great product.
That's funny. That's funny.
I don't know if I believe this story.
I actually validated the story with a production manager, Procter and Gamble. And he said, you know the story.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, it's an opportunity.
Well, that's like the story of the Post-it with 3M. Do you know how that got started?
Yep. Yeah, that's another one.
An engineer made a Post-it for himself because he's always writing notes. He wanted to stick it here, stick it there, and so on and so forth. Next thing you know, he was president of the division of the Post-it division. And I just shortened his story by a lot.
Yeah.
So Wade, I'm imagining one of the things that can come out of working with Seraph is you're not just solving the crisis, but there may be hidden opportunity in there that they didn't recognize.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I would tell you that just generally speaking, I don't really have any data on this, but just gut feel would tell you, 75% of it is solving the problem and 25% of it is finding additional opportunity that they may have not even realized that they had.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about manufacturing is that when you're producing a product, it doesn't take much to discover that with a few tweaks or something, this or there, you've got a new product, which is a new revenue stream.
Right.
So that's kind of exciting. And I hearken to the kids who say, oh yeah, but manufacturing is not very dynamic. It's not. Today's modern manufacturing is incredibly dynamic. It's digitally driven. The great things that we see as consumers and sometimes as users in the government are products that somebody had to manufacture, which means they had to think, how do I take all of the intelligence I need to put a rocket on the moon and make it fit into a capsule instead of a conference room, which is what the computers at the time used to fill. That's all coming out of manufacturing. Cool stuff.
It absolutely is.
That being said, we launched a rocket today going back to the moon.
The Ariane.
That's right.
The Ariane project. I'm very excited about that one. I wanted to look for the flag so that people go, oh, we really did land there. It wasn't filmed on a studio set. Well, yeah, Wade, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it is very interesting how even with the automotive, I keep coming back to automotive, but in the automotive industry, what we're seeing is it's a whole different manufacturing game now. I mean, the days of the dark cutting oil, machining, stamping plants, nasty, dirty kind of. That's all over. I mean, we go into stamping plants now and they're pristine, they're beautiful, very well kept, those kind of things. The automotive, the cars, the days of the big old stamping body panels and you still got to do all that, but ultimately it's a computer on wheels now. I'm seeing, I've been to a lot of the EV, we're very kind of on the cutting edge with the EV companies and going in there and seeing their manufacturing processes. Yes, it looks like a car plant, but it's very different because it's very software driven. It's very, it's a computer on wheels. So it's for the younger folks wanting to get into manufacturing. This is not your father or grandfather's manufacturing plant anymore.
Wade, I have to ask you, because we've heard so much about it, how are automotive manufacturers doing with the microchips that became in short supply because of COVID, and now they're scrambling to catch up and put out the newest model with all the chips in them?
Yeah, we've done a lot of early on. We did a lot of following that because it was obviously pretty detrimental to the automotive industry, because here you are wanting to ramp back up after COVID, that kind of thing, and you're having to build. In many cases, what the OEMs did was they decontented their vehicles. So instead of making the high-end vehicle that maybe had the nav system and all the bells and whistles on it, well, we're going to have to make the lower level vehicles because we can't get we got to conserve our chips, kind of thing. In many cases, they built vehicles knowing that they were going to have to replace some ECUs and those kind of things, or ECMs in their vehicle, and just parked them, which you still see a lot of those today, still sitting parked, waiting on components. Early on, people were saying, "Oh, this is temporary. We'll figure this out, and in 2022, we'll be back to the races." And yes, we are seeing additional capacity come online. We are seeing additional microchips in the supply chain, but it's not coming back to where it was supposed to be. We see that we're still going to be struggling with this a little bit in 2023. It's going to continue to ramp up. It's going to continue to be, we're going to get better and better all the while. But we looked at a V-shaped recovery, is what people were saying in 2021, and in 2022 we'll be back. We think we're still going to be dealing with this in 2024, but it'll slowly ramp up between now and then.
And in that crisis, Wade, did any of the manufacturers look and ask themselves, we've got 141 chips in this car. Do we really need 141 chips in this car?
No, actually, they committed and they doubled down on EVs.
Oh, okay.
Which is the need for more chips. I mean, average, I forget the numbers, and I'm probably going to mess this up. So, but I think at the time prior to us, being so heavily engaged in electric vehicles, there was 12 to 1700, chips required in a vehicle, and with an EV, there's more like 3,500. And so here you see all these OEMs coming out and saying we're going to go EV. That's the way to go. And so that just causes more demand for the chips.
Wow. Well, it'll be interesting to see how we come out of that curve, and we hope it's sooner than 2024. But Wade, we really appreciate you being on with us. Seraph is obviously doing some great work. We certainly encourage you to use this to promote yourselves and to promote us. We'd love to see it out there anywhere it can go. And the more penetration we get into the automotive industry, maybe we'll get some of the automotive senior executives on with us. Love to chat with them and see what they're doing. We appreciate you being on with us. Thanks, Wade.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Wade. And if anything comes up new and exciting in the near or distant future, pick up the phone and give us a call, and let's talk about it and see how we can fit you into the next phase.
Yeah, I will absolutely do that, because I'm not sure how many punches I need my card to get a yellow jacket, but I want to make as many punches as I can.
We'll take your size now and we'll support into your profile.
All right.
And for all of you watching, hopefully you're watching this as a YouTube video, although you may be listening to the audio as well. Follow us on YouTube. There's a little subscribe button down there if you want to punch that, become one of our subscribers and learn when the newest show is coming out. We'd like you to visit seraph.com to find out what Wade's company is doing, and also see us at jacketmediaco.com for all the podcasts we produce. Again, thank you for being with us on Manufacturing Talk Radio.